And welcome back to Attorneys on Call. In that first segment, we touched upon some of the things we're going to be talking about the rest of this program. Insurance, and do you have enough insurance? And what would happen if somebody crashed into you and that person didn't have insurance? And we're also going to talk about worker compensation claims. Joining us in studio is Whitney Powers, an attorney with the Whitley Law Firm. Great to see you, Whitney.
Thanks, Drew. Good to be here.
Ben, we did mention the fact that insurance is such an important topic for people to understand, because we hear terms like uninsured and underinsured and such. Can you kind of clarify what that all means for the average person?
And I think what's important to know is that so much, Dad talked on the last part of the segment about talking to your agent, but you remember so much now of buying insurance is going online and buying insurance using online apps even from some of the big companies that we see. And a lot of times that's not going to give you a lot of explanation of what these different coverages is. But let me start first with just a story of a conversation I had last week. This fella was hurt in a bad accident and was at one of the big hospitals in the Raleigh area and had bills over $120,000. And so his medical expenses for several nights of staying in the hospital was over $100,000. And I had to sit with him and tell him that the only amount available to pay for his claim is $50,000. And the first question he said, well Ben, what about my medical bills? And I had to tell him the person who hit you did not have enough coverage. Well, was there anything that can be done about my pain and suffering? No.
No?
There was not coverage. What about my lost wages? Well, there's not coverage. There's only $50,000 in coverage. It is a classic example of one of the toughest conversations I have in my job, is telling somebody that has that kind of injury that they don't have, the person who hit them does not have enough coverage. So most people think when you get hurt in a car accident, your claim is your medical expenses, your pain and suffering, your lost wages. Well, here's a myth. What the truth is your claim is often limited to the amount of insurance coverage from the person who hit you.
Okay. The responsible party.
The responsible party.
Okay.
The bad guy, the bad girl, the one that made the mistake, the drunk driver. Their insurance coverage usually controls how much your claim is worth. And the minimum in North Carolina, the minimum for you to be legal on the road is $30,000, okay? And then it goes up to 50 with my example. Then it goes to 100, okay? So what can you do? So here's a tip. Here's the secret.
Okay.
You can buy underinsurance motor coverage, okay? That's a UIM. So when you see that online as UIM/UM, which stands for uninsured motorist.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about. Talk to your agent. If you use an insurance agent, say, how much underinsurance coverage do I have? How much UIM do I have? Because that's what's going to protect you. That's what's going to protect you from getting hit and not ending up in the same situation that I had with my client when there's not enough money to pay the claim. Underinsurance protects you because it gives the bad guy or bad girl or negligent driver, it gives them more coverage than they had.
So the gentleman that you talked to that had the medical bills over $100,000, if he had that underinsurance, it would have taken care of that?
If he had a $100,000 insurance policy, then he would have that available coverage. What it does is it gives the negligent driver, the person who caused the accident, it gives them more coverage, and it doesn't cause your rates to go up, okay? I tell folks, I tell friends, family, and I want to tell you on this show that you're more likely to need underinsurance coverage than you are the liability portion of your coverage, meaning the part if you hit somebody. Okay. So what we're talking about is a secondary coverage.
Okay.
It's important to know what it is. It's important to know what you have, and I'd encourage you out there today, tonight, this morning, whenever, to look up your insurance declaration page. It's called a DEC page. Declaration page. It's going to list your coverage so that you'll know what you have and you'll know how much uninsured motorists you have. And the same thing is called UM, which I mentioned earlier, and that's uninsured motorist and underinsurance.
Right.
Uninsured is if somebody hits you, they don't even have any coverage.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So that's also out there to protect you. And it would amaze you how affordable good coverage is. I would encourage folks, look at your policy, talk to your agent. If you don't use an agent, you go direct online, find out that coverage and increase it. Increase it today, okay? I don't get anything out of that. You know, maybe
Right.
your agent gets something out of that.
Right.
But increase that coverage, because I see it so often, people getting hurt in car accidents in North Carolina, and they're getting hurt by people who don't have enough coverage, and they get stuck with the balance.
Do you find, Whitney, do you see a lot of people that just carry the minimum because they assume, and it probably is the least expensive, but they just carry the minimum because they have to, as opposed to what's been suggesting is that you got to make sure that you're covering not only yourself, but that other person, right, that may be at fault?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think especially, you know, when I first started practicing law and was in kind of my mid-20s, it was the thinking among a lot of my peers, you just buy the minimums because, you know, we're young, nothing's going to happen that goes wrong, and you never know what's going to happen. So, I mean, as much as you can reasonably afford to protect yourself is so important. I had an example of a peer of mine who was a young female. She was hit by a drunk driver, and the driver had no insurance.
No insurance.
So it went, the fact that she had a good amount of UIM really saved the day because she had a horrible head injury, and it took her a long time to bounce back. So it's difficult to kind of think that far ahead and that far in advance.
Right.
But you absolutely need to protect yourself.
And that's a great point, I think, that you bring out, is that the fact that young people, they tend to think they're invincible, right? And so maybe I don't need that much. But when you think about it, their life expectancy is so much longer, they probably need it more.
Exactly, and it's tough, I think, when you're starting out, or when you've got, you know, bills are tough and you're trying to make ends meet,
Sure.
you're young, or you've maybe lost a job, to think about paying more per month for anything. But but what has always surprised me in talking to people in the insurance industry is that it doesn't cost a whole lot to increase that coverage. So if any takeaway out there on this topic is, first of all, look at your declaration page, find out how much coverage you have, and increase it.
One thing we also want to talk about is workers' compensation. This is also an area that your law firm does a lot of work in, workers' compensation. And we know that a lot of people in North Carolina, they're hardworking people, but a lot of folks do suffer injury and get hurt on the job.
Right.
Let me give you a scenario. What happens in a case where the person is hurt on the job and maybe they're home for a week or two or something because of the injury, and then the boss calls or the office calls and says, we need you back to work, and they're sort of putting pressure on that person to get back. What is that, when you need an attorney, or what happens in that case?
Well, it's a classic situation. We see it all the time. And how it plays out is that you get hurt at work and the doctor gives you some restrictions, and let's call it light duty restrictions. The doctor says, hey, you don't need to lift any more than 10 pounds and maybe need to sit down most of the day. And then your job calls up, or the insurance company, the adjuster for the insurance company calls up and says, hey, they got something for you to do at work. You know, we need you to come on back. We got a desk job for you, or we got something else. It'll be within your restrictions, okay? And everybody gets nervous because they worry, they've heard stories, they've talked to their friends, and maybe they've heard stories about when they go back to work, they can be fired. Certainly a consideration in North Carolina. We have an employment at will state. They could fire you for they don't like the color of your shoes one day, you know, unless it's the discrimination, that's a whole different show. But North Carolina does not have a lot of protection for injured workers, okay? So you got to protect yourself, and protecting yourself may mean having a conversation with a lawyer. You can talk to me or any of our lawyers for free, and just talking to us doesn't mean that you need to hire us. In fact, we talk a lot on the show about how you don't mostly need a lawyer a lot of the time, but what you do need is that free legal advice.
Right.
So the thing to be careful about work, going back to that job under that kind of scenario we talked about, is to make sure that you're doing the work that they say they have within those restrictions. And here's the tip, you know, the insider tip, is to document what happens at work, either on your phone or at home, writing it down, so that the next time you see your doctor, you can let them know. Because if they work you outside of those restrictions, the only person that can help you in that situation really is the doctor changing your work restrictions if they truly don't have the kind of work they say they did, okay? And I always tell my clients the best evidence to tell a doctor about what's going on is going back to work. I encourage my clients, go back to work. You know, if they've got work and they say they've got something for you to do, go, okay? And if it's not what they say it is, tell your doctor. But the only way to know that is to try. And sometimes I think going back to work can help someone because they're at home, they're stuck at home, they're not used to doing that, they're used to working hard. And that can be a depressive activator.
Sure.
You know, so if there's something that your job has got and it's truthfully within your restrictions, go back to work, but document what happens, okay, and let the doctor know in case your restrictions need to be changed.
Coming up, Whitney, you've got some interesting cases that you're working on. Tell us what's coming up in our next segment.
So we're going to talk, Drew, a little bit about the Birmingham hip resurfacing. We've mentioned it before, but it's the newest type of metal-on-metal hip replacement that we're looking into, and it was used widely across North Carolina, and it's injured a lot of patients. So we're going to talk about that, and then a warming blanket that's also used during some orthopedic surgeries, the Bear Hugger device.
All right, back with that and much more on this edition of Attorneys on Call.